House Hunter.
Daddy.
He had just closed his eyes. That he was sure of. The room was pitch black. He couldn't see a thing.
Daddy.
A voice was whispering in his room. His eyes were open, his forehead broken out in a cold sweat. The voice was across the room. If he could just get his phone and shine the light around, he'd know everything was fine.
Daddy.
The voice was right by his ear now, and he jumped out of bed. He had felt the cold breath on his ear, smelled decay. Scrambling, he found his phone and shone the light around. Nothing next to him, nothing in the closet corners of the room, nothing in the far right corner, but there in the far left corner a hunched figure sat. It was a little girl, crying quietly.
You left, Daddy, she said. You left and it devoured us.
Reggie licked his lips, tasting the salt of his sweat on his upper lip. What? He whispered.
You left us here, and the house devoured us.
The girl turned around and revealed a hollow face. Reggie screamed and stood up, bolting from the room. He scrambled down the stairs, through the office, and into the big game room. He flipped lights on as he went down, not caring if anyone saw from the highway. When he flipped on the lights in the big game room, he found it empty. He pressed his hands to either side of his head and made a weird, groaning, laughing sound. He was going insane, legitimately insane. He heard a growl behind him and whirled around, his robe billowing around his body like a cape. Behind him was a large fat man puffing on a cigar. He held two thick chains in his hands, the ends of which were attached to two gigantic German shepherds. The dogs growled, baring all their teeth, which looked like thousands to Reggie. He backed up against the opposite wall, flattening himself as much as he could. "Don't make him angry," he said. He wore a fedora and a pinstripe suit. "You don't want to see him angry, pal." Reggie was sweating hard. So much for that shower, he thought. This was insane. He'd just leave. He scooted along the wall back toward the office. One of the dogs barked loudly. Both had their eyes glued to Reggie's every move. "Don't make him angry," the man repeated. Reggie slid into the office, the dogs watching him the whole time. When the walls of the office finally blocked out his movements, he bolted for the door. He could hear the dogs barking, growling, the clink of chains as they hit the tiled floor. Reggie didn't look back to see if they were pursuing him. He just wrenched the front door open and pulled it closed behind him. He took some deep breaths that were immediately stolen from his lungs as he heard two hard thumps on the door. He backed away quickly and fell over a potted plant. He scrambled back to his feet and looked toward the driveway, fully prepared to leave his stuff behind and just get in the Jeep and get out of here. But the driveway was empty. He looked down the long, winding driveway and did not see his car. He walked down the driveway a bit and still there was no sign of it. Maybe he had pulled it into the garage and forgotten. He thought of the 4 bottles of wine. The 4 bottles of wine he'd put in the recycling bin when he'd retrieved his duffel bag from the Jeep, which was parked in the driveway. He thought about going back into the house and checking the garage for his car and shuddered. The thought of entering the house again made him feel physically ill. He took this moment to pull the robe around him again and tie it securely. The once soft, warm robe was now cold and moist from his panic sweat. The softness now felt like millions of tiny pinpricks all over his skin, but he had no other choice right now but to bear it. He closed his eyes and took more deep breaths. He could walk somewhere to the closest town. There had to be a gas station or something along this highway that he would eventually come to. He still had his phone in his hand, and he looked down at it now. He tapped it, and the screen lit up. He tapped the maps icon and zoomed out of his location a bit. There was a gas station and a general store not too far from here. He tapped the gas station and the walking directions icon. It would take him about an hour to walk it. He was barefoot in a robe, but he had to go. He started down the driveway. As he got further from the house, the robe fell open again. "Damn it," he muttered. He tugged it back around him, but as he tugged, a large piece of the robe came away in his hand. He tugged the other side more gently, still moving away from the house, and still a chunk of robe came off in his hand. It began to feel itchier the farther away he got. Large pieces of the robe began to fall off around him. He lost an entire sleeve. He couldn't walk to the gas station naked. He stopped for a moment and thought about his options. If he could just keep a small piece of the robe to cover himself, maybe he could get away with it. He snatched the sleeve off the ground and held it to him. It scratched painfully, but he kept moving forward. Out of nowhere, a small bird came sailing up the driveway and crashed squarely into Reggie's chest. It fell to the ground, its head twisted towards its back. As he was leaning down, examining the small bird, another crashed into his back. Its beak took a small chunk of skin with it. "Ouch!" Reggie exclaimed. He stood up straight in time to see the biggest flock of birds charging towards him. He turned and ran back up the driveway. He heard their chirps and tweets as he ran toward the house. He thought momentarily of the 2 huge dogs waiting for him in the house, the head on the hands, the butler, the little girl in his room, but when he glanced back, he saw a wall of birds heading right for him. The front door opened a crack when he landed on the porch, and he flung himself inside, closing the door quickly. Right after the door clicked closed, he heard a battering on the entire front of the house. Every bird that had chased him up the driveway collided violently with doors, windows, and walls. He looked out the window and saw the entire front yard was riddled with the bodies of the birds. He reached his hands to his head and noticed the sleeves of the robe on his arms. It was completely restored, warm and soft, as he remembered. He strode through the office and game room, not looking around, trying to avoid any encounters that may be hidden away. He went to the garage door and flung it open. His Jeep was not inside. Instead, there was a station wagon. It was running, and inside the car was a man and woman in the front seat and 3 kids in the back. The garage was filled with the noxious gases escaping the tailpipe of the car. Reggie thought he was seeing dead bodies and that he should call the police, no matter what that meant for him, but then he noticed their clothes, their hair. It all reminded him of his childhood in the 1970s. The woman lifted her head and stared back at him with blank eyes. A maggot fell out of her nose. He slammed the door and raced back upstairs. He took off the robe and put on his own clothes. They were cold and damp, but he felt better about wearing them rather than the robe. He went back down the stairs and opened the front door. It was difficult to open since there were so many bird carcasses out there. It also felt like the door was pushing back against him. He strained and strained, but could not get the door to open properly. He let it go and it slammed closed. Reggie rested his head against the door and felt tears sting his eyes. Why had he even come here? Why? It was all that bitch's fault. His stupid wife running off to her dream job. So what if he'd messed around behind her back? It was only once or twice. He'd been a good husband. He'd provided for her and their kids. If she hadn't left him, he wouldn't be in this mess. The house sighed with satisfaction. There was a rustling noise, and he slowly turned to see the head on the hands. It was bouncing next to a bottle of whiskey and pills. The head looked excitedly from the bottles to Reggie. Reggie didn't give in right away. He stayed trapped in the house, feeling sorry for himself, encountering almost every spirit there was for 3 days. No one came, no one called him, no one missed him. It was at this point, this low, low point, that Reggie finally decided it was time to go. He had his phone in his pocket. He went down the stairs. The head had been waiting there the entire time. It still looked just as excited as it had when it first appeared here. It bounced excitedly, even hopped a couple of times when Reggie bent down to pick up the bottles. For a moment, with both bottles held in one hand, Reggie reached out a hand and pat the head. "You've been here since the start," Reggie said to it. It happily bounced, its dark eyes stark against the pale, waxy skin, black tongue lolling. Reggie went into the primary suite bathroom, put down the lid of the toilet, sat and closed the door, making sure it was locked. He sat on the floor opposite the toilet and opened the bottle of pills and bottle of whiskey. The smell of the whiskey comforted him. He knew he was making the right choice. He shook out a handful of pills and popped them in his mouth. He swallowed them down with a swig of whiskey. He finished the pills and continued to nurse the whiskey bottle. About 5 minutes after he finished the entire bottle of pills, he felt his phone buzz in his pocket. When he pulled it out, he saw his daughter was calling. Violet. She was 10. He stared at his phone in a daze. It seemed to ring for a very long time before it stopped. He felt his eyes drooping, but they popped open when his phone buzzed again, notifying him of a voice message. He tapped the notification and put the call to his voicemail box on speaker.
Hi, Daddy. Bill and I miss you a lot.
Bill, his 13-year-old son.
We want to come see you. Mom says you've been getting better, and if you keep going to the meetings, we can come visit you. I love you so much, Dad. Please get better so we can see you. Even Mom looks like she wants to see you. I keep hearing her crying at night in her room. Please call me back. I love you, Daddy.
Reggie felt tears on his cheeks before he even realized he was crying. He looked down at the empty pill bottle and half-empty whiskey bottle. He'd screwed up. This wasn't the right choice. It was so clear now. The smell of whiskey made his stomach turn, and he hoped it was all coming up. He pushed up the lid of the toilet and waited for the heave that would empty his stomach of its contents. But it didn't come. He shoved his fingers down his throat, but the reflex wasn't working. He was feeling so sleepy, so relaxed. His mind was getting foggy. He wanted to panic because he knew this was the end and he didn't want it to be. He didn't want to leave Violet and Bill. It was his fault everything had gone sideways. He was the asshole. But it didn't matter now. The pills had done their work already. Reggie collapsed beside the toilet. 2 cars pulled into the driveway. A woman and a couple with their 12-year-old child got out of their respective cars, putting on face masks. It's been listed for 47 days, the woman said, so there might be less competition. That would be nice, said the man. The woman corralled their bouncing son, and they all made their way to the front door. It's a ways out here, she stated. Yeah, it might be too rural, the man said. Nice land, though. It backs up to a forest, right? Yes, that's right. The woman, who was evidently a real estate agent, opened the key box and unlocked the front door.
Oh no, a dead bird, the boy said.
There by the front door was a single dead finch.
Oh, sad.
Don't touch it. I wonder how it got here. It's a strange place for it to run into a window, the woman said. The front door opened and the woman flinched a bit. The house could tell these people wouldn't stay. The woman and the child had that sense about them. They knew something was wrong with the place as soon as the door opened. The family and agent walked around the house. They commented on the weird layout. The primary bedroom being downstairs, and the door to the toilet locked tight added to their sense of unease. Their son, who was usually all over the place at viewings, was sticking close to his mother and father, commenting about how they shouldn't put an offer on this house. The house was impressed. This boy could grow up to be something of a spiritualist if he tried. His mother had the makings as well. She kept the boy close and only allowed him to wander away when she knew he was with the agent. Oh, look, a laundry chute, the woman said. That's convenient. She opened it and looked down and saw the top of the washer. Her eyes widened and she closed it quickly. What's over here? Her husband asked. Nothing much. Closet for storage, laundry chute, and elevator, she said. I don't like this place. We should go. Yeah, it's very unique. This is a very specific home for specific needs, the agent commented. All right, let's go, the husband said. The house noticed that the woman never mentioned where they were going and kept cutting off her son when he would start to ask if they were going home. The house knew that's probably what he was going to ask, but Mother never let him finish. It was a good thing she did. None of the spirits trapped here would be able to follow these folks. They had to say their destination out loud in the house for that to work. So when the family climbed into their car, all 25 spirits stayed put in their areas of the house. That night, the woman told her husband about the feelings she'd had inside the house and about how the laundry chute had a washer just below it. Yeah, that sounds pretty standard, the husband said. True, but remember we saw the utility room. There was no washer and dryer, and the laundry chute was over by the elevator. The laundry room we saw was not over there. So where did that laundry chute lead to? A room we never saw? the wife said. The husband felt a chill go down his spine. You're right. Damn, that's creepy, he said. Yeah, no wonder it's been on the market for so long, she said. And what was up with that toilet in the primary suite? Do you think someone was hiding in there? The husband thought for a minute. Maybe. Maybe it's whoever owns that red Jeep in the driveway.